Romantics dropped on Netflix, everyone binge watched it in a manner that's usually reserved for thrillers. So the woman responsible for that compelling quality, to credit or to blame, is Smriti Mundhra. She's joining me today. Hi, Smriti.
Hello.
Hi, my first question to you is, whenever people talk to you about the Romantics, what do they say? Oh, I didn't know about this, and this is the biggest revelation the show had for me.
It's been such a range, of things like that. I think the most interesting one to me is when I've read, people comment, that they had no idea that so many of the iconic films that they grew up watching were all made by the same filmmaker, Yash Chopra. I think that's been the most interesting revelation when people have really realized, like, actually the breadth and the body of his work.
But really, can you name a film of his? Because I feel all these films are very closely associated, almost synonymous with him. So, would you say these people are actually perhaps from the diaspora who didn't know about these films, the filmmaker, despite these films being ubiquitous?
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. But I also think, like, the movies that we've watched, 20, 30, 40 years ago, or as children, or, sometimes you don't pay attention when you're a child, you don't pay attention to who's made what film, who the director is and things like that. You're just soaking in the experience. And then so later to sort of see that, they all belong to one person's filmography is, can be exciting.
Well, now that you say that, it is true that I didn't know perhaps Lamhe was his, and even Khel Khel Mein, I think I've watched it, but I didn't know that was him. So I think these were a couple of revelations for me as well.
Yeah, see? Surprise yourself too.
Yeah, yeah. So not just the diaspora, that's true. And
Yeah.
out of all the 30 illustrious, popular stars that you had, who had the funniest outtakes? I feel like this was a documentary that had a lot of humor in it, and I'm sure the outtakes did too.
Yeah. I mean, funniest outtakes, I would definitely say Ranveer Singh. He just he is unpredictable.
That really was some energy that he brought to the documentary. So diverse from everyone else. And what I loved was the sort of unique insight that everybody had, people who had worked in Yash Raj, and they it really gave you um, a glimpse that only an insider could.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was by design. We wanted it to really feel like an insider's perspective with an outsider's context, me being the outsider.
So, Smriti, whose narrative was this? Did you have this stream of narrative that you put on paper, or did you collaborate with Yash Raj to come out with the docu series that we see today?
Yeah. This was an idea that I had, that I pitched to Yash Raj Films. I initially, you know, sort of I knew I needed them to sort of bless this endeavor because I needed access to all of the films and the music and all of the behind the scenes archives and things like that. It's an archival docuseries, so you can't do that without all of the visual material. And so I knew, like, I had the idea and I pitched them on this vision, that I had, but I knew I needed their involvement in terms of access to all of the materials. And so yeah, that's sort of how it happened. Is I sort of pitched, I wrote out I sort of, thought about my vision for the series and I wrote out a whole pitch. I talked them through it and I, made them understand what my vision was. And thankfully they were excited to give me all the access that I needed.
During the credits, I also saw that Uday Chopra is an executive producer. So, was he more hands on with this project?
In the sense, yeah, in the sense that he, you know, gave me a lot of insight. I used to talk to Uday when we were in the research phase. We talked almost every day. And he gave me a lot of insight, into the history and into obviously the personal family stories and things like that. And he also really helped, along with others at the studio, to help facilitate to get me all the materials I needed, particularly like the personal archives, Yash Chopra's wedding video and, all the personal family photos and things like that. But I think the most significant contribution they made that I will always be grateful to him for was he came up with the title for the series. We were really struggling to find the right title, and he suggested this title, and I immediately loved it. So that is entirely to his credit.
Well, the Hindi word romanchak is also very close to the romantic. So I like the title too. I think it's perfect. It's apt. And yeah, it's not just, it has such a wide spectrum of meaning. So I love that. But staying on Uday, now every time somebody mentions him in connection to the documentary, there's always the accent gate that's brought up. What has he said about it so far?
Uday is very good natured and very good humored. I think honestly, he has lived in the US, he's lived in India, he's a sort of global citizen in that sense. And I think when you go back and forth, frequently between different cultures, you start to reflect, whoever you sort of whoever you're speaking with, whoever speak in front of you and who you're speaking with, that's the sort of cadence and the intonation and all of that, that you sort of slip into. And I was the one who was interviewing him, and you can tell like I have an American accent. I think that's probably why, his accent may be leaning a little bit, more on the, American side or whatever it is, because it's like, he does go back and forth between both worlds. And in talking to me, I think he slipped into that, style of speaking. So that's definitely my responsibility. But he has such a good sense of humor about it, and I think he takes it all in stride.
He has so many fans of his humor, and after this documentary, so many want to hear more from him. Speaking of another Chopra that many love to hear from, but were shocked and didn't believe it till they actually saw it. It's a question everyone has. I don't know the answer to this. How did you convince Aditya Chopra?
That was, definitely one of the most challenging aspects of making the series. Like everyone, who's approached Aditya Chopra for an interview, the immediate answer was a no. And they were this, he was very accommodating in terms of talking to me off the record, to give me context and behind the scenes. And of course, like, the studio was very gracious in giving me access to all the materials I needed. But he said, basically, that's where my involvement with this thing ends. And over time, though, I think when I was able to show him the scope of what I was trying to do and show him like how many people were participating and speaking on behalf of his father and, his family and everything. I think it just became really clear that the series would be incomplete without his perspective, and it would also just be it would be odd to have collected so many people to speak about the impact and influence of his father and not have his voice in there. And I think eventually he was able to see that, and that's when he agreed.
But I think all the words have been exhausted by the stars who were there in the documentary. It's a coup. It's a huge one, to get Aditya Chopra. So I think that really definitely made that documentary. And I think I was wondering why we didn't see more of was an in-depth view into Yash Raj from the studio, the physical space. Perhaps people would have wanted to see that and his seventh floor office.
Well, the office is in there. You can see the office. We filmed his interview in his office. So,
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
yeah,
So
you do
that's his
see it.
office.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
do see quite a bit, yeah, of the studio, the physical studio space in the series. In fact, I don't think there's much, that we didn't cover in terms of showing it. But at the end of the day, as I think we tried to communicate in the series, is that the studio was more of a vision. It was a bigger idea than just a brick and mortar physical space. It was the idea of autonomy in storytelling, especially in a globalizing world, and especially, at a time where there was a lot of corporate colonization, happening of different sectors in India. Everyone at that time was looking to India as an opportunity. And there were, multinationals and people coming in to essentially take over, different sectors of our economy. And I think for Aditya, the studio was, like our storytelling is our greatest export. it's also the way in which we are defined, in history. And for him, I think it was really important that that be protected and that be controlled, by us as Indians. And that's the bigger idea behind the studio, and I think the more significant idea. But yeah, there is plenty of shots of the actual brick and mortar,
So,
including this shot of MF Hussein, and Yash Chopra painting, doing the first
oh
brush
yes,
strokes
yes,
of the mural.
yes.
Yeah.
And was Rani's portion also shot in the studio?
I don't remember actually where we filmed Rani's interview. I'm sorry, it was a while ago and we filmed so many interviews. So I don't quite remember exactly
Yeah.
where we filmed her interview. But it was, either it must have been in her office in the studio or something like that.
I guess it had all those pictures and trophies, I
Yeah.
think. So that's true. So maybe we did see a lot of the studios. I'll go back and try and find more clues there. But you're talking about that studio takeover. That insight was invaluable. The one that Aditya Chopra gave about how he wanted to stave that corporate monogamy or monopoly off, and which is why he started the studios. I think that was also something that was lesser known. The intent behind starting that studio.
Yeah, definitely. And I found it really fascinating. And again, just reinforcing what a visionary he was is.
Were there any other people on your wish list that you wanted for this documentary? I feel like it was quite an exhaustive list that we saw on screen, but any names that you would have wanted to be included?
Oh, definitely. I would have loved to have had more time. I mean, the hardest challenge in this series, one of the hardest challenges was condensing so much material, hundreds of hours of material into 4 1-hour episodes that spanned essentially 70 years, in time. And so a lot of tough choices had to be made, but I could have easily made this a 10-part series, or more. And, I would have loved to have taken like a closer look at, the musicians, that have worked, to create the music, in Yash Raj films. I would love to have talked to even more of the actors, of some of the seminal films, but we tried to stay rigorous, and in telling the story of the films, to tell the story of the studio and of India, at whatever time period it was. So sometimes there were lesser known films that actually spoke, more, that had something more to say about, the story of the studio or what was happening culturally, sociopolitically, what it is at the time. And sometimes they're like very beloved films that just didn't necessarily fit that historical context.
Mhm.
So, there's some focus on films that people maybe don't expect, and then, some less focus on films that are beloved, and people are like, why didn't you talk more about this film or that film, But, the intent of the series was not to do a highlight reel of the most beloved films and the stories behind those films. It was really about telling a larger story, about, Yash Chopra's career, the studio, and then India, and all its iterations over these last few decades. So that was really what went inside, the choices behind who we interviewed, what we included, what films we covered, all of that.
This was such an engrossing series, and considering its massive popularity, I find out it's trending across the world, not just in India. So I'm sure you have thoughts, so you've been asked about this. Could we expect to see a continuation exploring those topics that you just said that you would have liked to dwell upon?
It's going to be very hard to top what we've done with the romantics. And I think, as a filmmaker, I always want to leave the audience asking for more. So I don't know, honestly, if there's, if we'll do more, on this particular topic, or, expand and do, I would love to do more series or more films, documentaries on other, beloved and influential filmmakers and other, sort of regions of Indian cinema, not just Hindi cinema. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of latitude to do more, but it has to sort of equal, the standard that we've set with the romantics.
Could I prod you to tell me any names you have in mind or anything we could see in the future?
Yeah, I'll definitely name names because hopefully they'll watch this and, somebody will get in touch with me. But, I would love to do, it would be a dream to do a docuseries, a very definitive, in-depth docuseries on Amitabh Bachchan, I would love to do something on Rajnikant. Um, of course, I would love to do something on Shah Rukh Khan, but something very in depth and substantive on Shah Rukh Khan. There's probably more, even more, but like these are three that immediately come to mind. I would also just love to do, a series that's solely focuses on the influential women, both in front of and behind the camera. So there's just so much more scope, for this type of storytelling, and I would love to be a part of it.
I'm adding all that to my watch list. I would watch any and all of them. Smriti, I wish you all the luck in getting them made, mostly selfishly, because I want to watch them. And I'll be watching everything you do very closely. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
talking to me and answering all those doubts that I had about the romantics.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Smriti. I'm so excited to see what more you have for us. And I'm waiting for the next season of Indian matchmaking. Is that coming soon?
Yeah. It'll be out this year for sure in the next few months, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yay. I have that to look forward to. Yay.
Yes,
Excellent.
yes.
Best of luck with it. And I'm going to talk to you very soon. Thank you. Have a
Okay.
fabulous evening. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.